Hello, I'm Linda Graham, author of Resilience, Powerful Practices for Bouncing Back from Disappointment, Difficulty, and even Disaster. In this series of conversations, you'll learn from many experts offering practices that help them recover their own resilience. In this conversation with Elisha Goldstein, we learn to use the reactive tensing and bracing of our body as a cue to soften our reactivity and shift our responses. We also learn the importance of creating a light and spacious environment that nourishes, supports us, brings us joy, including asking whether the people in our lives inspire, nourish, and support our resilience. We also learn why resilience is not a noun, something to achieve, but a verb, something to live. Welcome to this conversation, exploring resources for recovering resilience. Today I'm talking with Elisha Goldstein. Elisha is a clinical psychologist and co-founder of the Center for Mindful Living in West Los Angeles. He's also the creator of a wonderful 6-month online mentorship program called A Course in Mindful Living. Welcome, Elisha, and thank you so much for taking the time today.
It's always great to be with you, Linda, so I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. So, Elisha, you have written several wonderful books on mindfulness and how present moment awareness has a huge effect on our sense of ease and happiness and courage and even purpose in our daily lives. So if we see resilience as capacities to face and deal with challenges, to cope skillfully and well with everyday disappointments and even disasters, how can mindfulness practice help people become more resilient?
Well, I think we're from an evolutionary perspective, we're triggered to move away from the fire. You know, when we see kind of a fire, something difficult, something uncomfortable, we move away from it. So avoidance is typically the thing that kind of gets us in trouble, because what we resist persists, as the popular saying goes. And so mindfulness can help us understand and be aware, take a step back, just in a general perspective. Just take a step back and see, what are my unhealthy patterns? So for example, if I feel overwhelmed in a work day, as an example, there's just too much stress, too much to do. And so what I do is I just start kind of popping off on my social media or checking out the news and, getting all of that kind of, getting all of that overwhelm of negative information typically, that even stresses me out a little bit more, but temporarily soothes me. Then I come back and I have still all this work to do. It can help me understand my unhealthy habits and maybe how to become more aware of them, how to become more aware of maybe when I'm bracing in a particular moment, my body's starting to brace because it's feeling overwhelmed, stress, anxiety, whatever it might be, and then pop out of it, note it. So now I'm stepping into that space between the stimulus and response, as Viktor Frankl's quote so elegantly kind of describes. And now I'm widening that, and I can be aware of it, soften my body, and refocus. So that can help me be more productive. That can help me access what I'm needing more and be able to kind of tune into that and give myself that, whatever it might be, whether it's softening my body, whether it's reaching out to a friend, taking a walk, letting the sunshine splash against my face, any of that. So mindfulness, just awareness, is really the springboard of where healing and living effectively begins.
Oh, thank you. And do you have a particular go-to practice that you use yourself that can pretty reliably bring you back into that kind of awareness and thus open you to be more resilient?
I've kind of like tuned this over the years in my life, and what I kind of came to was exactly that. So the question is, to me, what's simple and easy that I can bring into my day to support resiliency? And I'll answer that in kind of two different answers, I guess. Okay, so the first one is something really simple, and I mentioned it again a little bit in the previous answer, but I'll say it again because I think it's so important and so easy. And if everyone who listens to this can just take this and experiment with it and play with it, it'll be interesting to see what the days, weeks, and months ahead in your life look like. So it's really just, if I can set the intention to be aware of when my body, because my body is the signal that can be the cue for this, when my body's starting to tense, That's really it. I don't really want to be aware of, I don't need to be aware of my mind so much, because I'm not going to use my mind to combat a stressed and
Mm-hmm.
anxious mind, or a mind that's kind of spiraling down a depression spiral. So instead, I'm going to notice my body and use that as a cue. And when my body's tensing or bracing, the
Mm-hmm.
first thing I'm going to do is very simple. The first thing I'm going to do is take a deep breath,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to soften my body. And sometimes it's not so easy to soften your body. So I'm actually going to stretch my body to create opening in the part of my body that's tensing. And so why? Because when it comes to our mental health or our kind of lack of resiliency, I think of things like, what is that? It's suffering. So what's suffering? Well, stress, anxiety, depression, addictive, falling into bad habits, addictive behaviors, that kind of craving, that urge that we feel in those particular situations. So if I can shift my body, I can shift my mind. They're completely connected, obviously. So we have this nervous system that goes down the entire body, and the legs and the arms. And so if I can use my body, I can begin to kind of shift my mind. So I start there. So that's really simple. Be on the lookout for where you're bracing, soften or shift your body. Simple exercise. And that will really support your resiliency. So because it'll pop you out of the whatever patterning you're doing in that moment. Second thing, and maybe this could have been a follow-up question, but I think this is a really important hack, for our lives, support resiliency. So we are completely interconnected with our environments. Albert Einstein is famous for saying, like, we have this, our sense of separateness with people and things is an optical delusion of consciousness.
Right.
And so if I know that, and I know that because when I walk into a cluttered room, I tense. And there's plenty of research that shows clutter increases anxiety. So when I walk into a group of people who I'm not comfortable with, or who don't remind me of, supportive things, I might tense. When I walk into a room that's open, spacious, light, that my body softens. And designers have known this forever. They design office buildings in this way. Different things. Different people hire consultants to create their houses in a way that feel very light and spacious. So I want to begin to take an inventory of my environment, and become more aware of what things in my environment inspire a sense of, we might use the word resiliency, but inspire a sense of kind of support, inspire a sense of joy. So some of the positive things in life, and begin to ask yourself, if this thing that I'm holding right here does not, I'm trying to find something on my desk here, does not have really utility or inspire kind of joy, why do I have it? Really what it is now is it's a cue for my brain that kind of maybe it kind of takes my energy away from maybe a more resilient state. So that's the first thing. So take an inventory. The second thing is really around the people in your life. Do the people in your life support resiliency? You can ask yourself that. So you say, the people that I spend most of my time with on a day-to-day basis, like literally counted in hours, and you want to say, well, does chatting count? Does the virtual environment count? Yes, it does. So the people you have most contact with, do they inspire a sense of resiliency in you? So just kind of rate them on that, not to be cold, but just kind of rate them. And then say, now spread it out a little bit and say, are there other people in my life who I don't maybe really have much contact with that that are in my life, and sort of list them out, and then ask the same question: does this person inspire resiliency, and or support, for me, nourishment? And if you find people that are on a scale of 1 to 10, like high up there, that you don't have much contact with, set an intention to really make more contact with them, if you can. If there's difficult people, this is a different conversation. There's difficult people in your life that you have frequent contact with that you can't like really get distance from. Then we ask ourselves, like, well, what kind of strength can be built in my relationship with them that supports an inner resiliency? So, for example, and this comes a lot from, you talk a lot about this, Linda, which is, the importance around building the strength of self-compassion. So if you have a difficult person in your life, that's a difficult experience. They're giving you an opportunity to really kind of strengthen that muscle of self-compassion. This is a difficult moment. What do I need right now? How can I give myself Give myself that. Also kind of helps us strengthen our heart of maybe kind of wishing them well and more at ease, because if they weren't such a difficult person, and they had more ease in their life, maybe they would cease to be a difficult person. That would be easier for me. So I can happily wish them that, that kind of thing. So we're encouraging, strengthening our hearts, strengthening self-compassion, with the difficult people in our lives that are there. So your social circles are really important to take inventory of and begin to curate.
So I'm hearing implied in your answers that it's important to practice these practices ahead of time, before there's a major stressor or an emergency to deal with. And could you say something about suggesting or recommending how people could practice these things ahead of time?
I recommend practicing them as a lifestyle. Making them part of your life. And of course, the reason being is, and I oftentimes give this analogy, which is, you don't teach kids to walk during earthquakes. Like, they're trained to walk when the ground is steady. And then if something later kicks them off balance, they'll be able to balance a little bit more because they already know how to kind of balance and walk. So yes, of course, when you're in a difficult situation, or a heightened situation, you don't have that executive function. That part of your brain is sort of offline. And like quite literally, you see the blood flow sort of retracting from the prefrontal cortex in the brain, and much more activity going on in the amygdala. And so we want, more of an integrated brain, I guess, when we're kind of practicing these things. Also just take note of for a moment, our brain uses memories to create perception and decision making in a given moment. And so, the more memories we can create, the more likely that is to be brought up even in difficult moments. And so you're more likely to remember them. So you want to kind of create a number of memories of the things we're talking about here in order to even have the potential of bringing it up. And I know I talk about this in Uncovering Happiness, how I say another important thing to do is to help remember this stuff. Anything you're going to learn on any of these interviews is to actually visualize that difficult moment that you're having, and visualize whatever it is that kind of resiliency exercise. Because what that does is that creates a connection in your mind between the experience and the skill. And then, so when the experience, something like the experience comes up again, your brain will associate it, more likely to associate with that skill, and you're more likely to remember it. And that's what you need. You need that ability to remember, that in that moment.
Absolutely. So that leads me to, what can people do when the prefrontal cortex is offline? They're not being very resilient, and they're feeling kind of stuck in not being resilient, can't quite get back to center. Are there practices of mindfulness or others that you would recommend that can actually help them get out of that hole?
I think this is the bridge of mindfulness and self-compassion, or I might say self-compassion incorporates mindfulness in the definition. But that the moment of kind of waking up is mindfulness. I'm stuck right now, so that's a moment of just that very recognition is a moment of awareness, a moment of mindfulness. And I think, to me, I like to, I really like that the exercise of the self-compassion letter, where you in an okay state, in a state where you're not, massively challenged in the moment, you write yourself a letter to to your future self who is challenged, and you say, hey, I know, dear me, hey, I know times can get tough sometimes, and I want you to remember, in the good moments that, these types of things are happening. And in the difficult moments, here's some things that I think might be helpful to you. Take it easy on yourself, as best you can, be kind, love me, there's something like that. And that way you can have that accessible to not just have the mindfulness in a moment, but to help inform you maybe and remind you of what you're maybe needing in that moment. And to get the encouragement from yourself. You may not be feeling that, but that letter is from you. So then it helps you ignite that within yourself and to take action towards it. Because in a difficult moment, sometimes our memory is not very good, because stress actually impacts the hippocampus, which is involved with learning and memory and putting things in context. So
Right.
we don't necessarily have the memory accessible, so that letter will remind you
Mm-hmm.
of maybe what you're needing, and maybe some actions that'll be supportive to you. And you can even say, don't worry about whether you think this is going to work or not. Just trust me and go out there and do it, or something like that.
So that letter, in a sense, can pre-wire the brain to be able to react in certain ways. And then the letter itself reminds people to be able to respond in certain ways.
I like that term, Linda. Pre-wire. Yeah, I like that. Good.
Yeah. So in the last couple minutes here, are there any additional insights or even questions about resilience? Meaning, what do people sometimes not think of or associate with resilience that would be important?
I think the biggest mistake people would think of with resilience is thinking it's a noun. I think that's the biggest mistake, is to think of resilience as a noun.
Mm-hmm.
Much like people think about like balance as a noun, like it's a
Mm-hmm.
thing. I can achieve balance.
Mm-hmm.
And resilience isn't a noun; it's a verb. And so it's something that we are constantly fluid with and working with. Much like if anyone here has any experience with yoga, you can stand on one leg for balance. But what you'll find is, if you're really mindful and aware of standing on that one leg, you're never really just boom, not moving. You'll catch your ankle like quickly doing quick shifts here and there, back and forth. Like even if you're very skilled, it'll be like very subtle, quick shifts, like back and forth. There's always a fluidity. There's a movement to it.
Right.
And so resilience isn't something to achieve, I guess. It's it's something to live. And so I'd say that if you can kind of take that to heart, that it's a learning process and you're constantly kind of growing with it, then I think that will help quite a bit along the way.
Elijah, I thank you very, very much for that. I agree with you completely, what you just said. And thank you very much for sharing your wisdom and your warm, kind heart with us today. Thank you.
Great, Linda. You too. I really appreciate you too.
So these conversations will be archived on my website, lindagraham-mft.net. May they be truly useful and helpful to you and yours.